Ho ho ho. uh, Merry Christmas. I'm not calling you a ho. That's just what they say during Christmas for whatever reason. Um, yeah. Hopefully you got some nice things, some bling bling from the Santa, rather than a call. Hope you're doing good. The time of Christmas, huh? Speaking of time, I want to talk about time. I want to talk about time. I want to talk about the three types of times: um, Chronos, Kairos, and Aion. These are just terms, I believe, Greek terms to describe certain states of consciousness and the motion of consciousness. Why is it important to know these things? Well, because everything consists of that. Um, and I suppose everything that I am teaching here is to how to play the game of life. I thought I thought we already settled this. Why the silly questions, man? Anyway, right. Okay. So we have three types of times: Chronos, Kairos, and Aion. Um, what is Chronos? Chronos is the chronological time that we are very familiar with, and we measure it with calendars and watches and clocks and stuff like that. That's chronological time. It's basically a measure of frame by frame um, events. And Chronos weaves everything into one cohesive story that has a beginning and the end. Okay, that's the thing with Chronos. It has a beginning and the end. Um, okay, the problem with Chronos is it has a beginning and the end, which means it indicates the birth and the death. And if we live only with the reality and awareness of Chronos, we are basically living in the wrong direction. Almost guaranteed, if not 100% guaranteed. Because anyone who is not aware of anything beyond Chronos is scared. It, it never seems like there's enough time. It's always slipping away from you. And the life is all about just waiting until you're done with it. Now, anyone who is not aware about anything else besides this type of time is obviously, in my book, sometimes people call themselves realist, right? They think that they're realist or atheist or whatever, and they think that they're very stoic in this reality that, like, hey, I'm just going to be born and I'm just going to die, and the life that you live once and that's it. Um, and they take that belief as the reality without investigating anything more within themselves. Um, Basically, not really looking for the map in this video game. Basically, just loading up this game, realizing that they're non-player character, and saying, I'm not player character. I'm just gonna go do my shit and then I'm gonna die. And so all my life is gonna be the same thing over and over again. And that is supposed to be intellectual, you see. But it's not intellectual at all, because it's really not true rationalism. It's not really true deductionism, because there is one point where they don't want to cross, and they call themselves intellectual and rational people, but they do not want to cross a certain point where they would have to admit the deeper realities. What do I mean by that? They do not turn this sharp intellect on to their own consciousness, and they only look that way. That's the problem. And that is not real, and it's not really being rational. You have to take that tool that you're so proud of and turn it upon yourself and start deducing yourself. Okay? And in yoga it's called jnana. And it's a way using intellect to, it's not analysis, okay, because analysis, it will never get you answers. That's where these people live. They live in analysis, and it's just a mental masturbation. It's not that. It's actually brutally looking at your own beliefs and questioning them. Okay? You question them. Why do I believe this? Why is this is to be so? How do I know if it's true? And so that requires a type of sacrifice, because you're actually have balls enough to turn this upon yourself and start dissecting what you thought is your identity. So it's a type of death. This is why a real rational, a real intellectual person has balls enough to turn his tool of investigation upon his own consciousness. That's true rationalism. And I could speak with any of these intellectuals and ask questions, and I could prove to them that they are actually not really rational human beings. That they're rational to a point where it feels safe. After that, they don't want to cross it. And they're great tools, but they're not intelligent. But anyway, enough of bashing intellectual people. No, they're not all of them, but like that. But I'm trying to show that a lot of people who call themselves atheists are actually religious people, and they act from the belief rather than turning towards that belief and dissecting it. Okay, so that's enough on that part. That's the only way. Well, I shouldn't say the only way. There's a lot of other ways, but the answer is always the same. But one of the ways that you could figure out this game of life by using your intellect, turning upon yourself. Okay. And if you do that, you will start finding some of the interesting observations, like coincidences and synchronicities. Okay, when you put your awareness and attention on that and start questioning that, that's when something else may appear to be real. and that is called Kairos. It's sort of like unexplained synchronicities or serendipitous moments that just happen in life, and they're just mind-boggling because they are not calculable. How can a person have so many, let's say, events in their life that's supposed to be 1 in a million, 1 in a billion, right? So another word for this is luck. That's what luck is those serendipitous moments where out of nowhere everything just comes into perfect alignment. Okay, so that's Kairos. And Kairos can only come into your reality, and maybe you've noticed as well, when you start questioning your reality, or you're becoming more aware and spend a little bit more time outside Chronos, when you're not in anxiety state. Then you start noticing synchronicity and start noticing these events. And what I also notice is that some of those, there are positive synchronicities, there are negative synchronicities. If you follow synchronicities, it will take you somewhere. And it's a bit of an adventure. And there are positive synchronicities and there are negative synchronicities. Meaning, it will take you towards basically a hero's route or the villain's route. And Kairos is something that kind of, it like injects itself into Chronos. Chronos is always running itself, right? And it's not determined, right? Chronos is not determined. And so you see, there's some things that not yet been rendered, something that's not yet been generated. So what is going to be generated, what is going to be rendered, Kairos determines that. And Kairos is very closely related to alchemy and your imagination. Okay, it's that process that whatever you feel to be true, whatever story you imagine, that seemed to inject itself into the Chronos. And then suddenly you're going through time, you're going through your life, and those objects, those events, those coincidences start seeping in, chick, 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 like it's injecting itself into Chronos. Because obviously Chronos is an illusion. It's not really anything linear, but that memory that we have creates the film real. That's where the word real coming from, because it's reeling. But it's quite obvious that it's not determined. In Chronos is what I would say the Chronos is something like a right. So if somebody, let's say, was writing a script for a movie, which would be Kairos, the script is already written. And so as you're going to go through the movie, some of the scenes are already predetermined. And they're going to be very coincidental. Okay? And so as you watch the movie, you can see that a lot of times there's scenes that, like, as always, these perfect coincidences. Most of the movies are like that. You see, like, that doesn't happen in real life, but actually it does. But anyway, it's because it's written. Okay? And if there wasn't Kairos component in the movie, if there wasn't synchronicities in the movie and coincidences, you would not be interested in watching the movie. That's part of the fun of watching this unexpected synchronicities that are being um, laid upon the flow of time. Now, this flow of time is the real, and the only free will that you have in that Chronos is basically how you're going to act that scene. The scene is already written. The words may be written, but there's very little degree of freedom of how you're going to act, right? And that may be determined by your past. Actually, is determined by your past, but there is a little bit of a degree of freedom of how you're going to act in that moment. You cannot control all the characters that are already there. It's already written, okay? What you can only control is very small degrees of freedom, which are essentially like the flavor of the story, right? Small details that are not really that relevant to the story, but it fills in. It's not as vanilla. It has color, right? What the hell am I talking about? If the story is written, the actor can say the line in many different ways, okay? Or even not the line, but the meme, the essence of the communication, could say it in many different ways. But the essence of the communications is written, okay? So, you can see the only degree of freedom in the Chronos. Not a lot of degree of freedom. This is why people don't feel free if they believe that Chronos is the only thing that exists, okay? So now anyway, upon investigation, you start realizing there is such thing as something else, Kairos, some sort of synchronicity moments, and it seems that you are in charge of these. They seem to relate to your state of consciousness, okay? Your mood, actually. So now we have this playing the scene, acting out the scene. We also have writing the story, creating, right? So now we have those components, playing and creating, acting and writing a script, programming and playing. Okay, so you can see these analogies in the movies and in the video games, okay? And Chronos is to play. That is why we press play when we are watching, the story unfold. Or we play video game. Without Chronos, that's not possible, okay? Because if you, in the creative mode, you cannot really play. Play restricts your creativity and makes you be a character, okay? So that's why there's a need of Chronos. Without Chronos, you cannot play. Without Kairos, you cannot create, okay? Now, so we have the creation and play, those two types of times, Chronos and Kairos. Kairos is a creative, Chronos is playful. Now, we can go deeper, and if we do go deeper, what we notice in our states of consciousness is beyond the emotional states, beyond the moods, they seem to coalesce in two primordial states of consciousness. And sometimes people call that infinity. And infinity is death and life all in one. And the quality that you may experience in consciousness is that the peace, when the peace is so deep that you are touching eternity, because peace is stillness, there's no motion, or at least it feels like there's no motion. If there is no motion, there's no beginning, there's no end. Okay? And another side of that is the intensity of that infinity, and that is bliss. The peace and bliss. From peace and bliss, all these other emotions stem from. Okay? So now we have this emotional world, chronological or logical world, and we also have this a primordial, timeless, infinite world, where the only variable in that is the intensity of peace or intensity of bliss. There's still a variable. This is why we have to say that there's even a point in describing and calling it Aion, or Aion, depending on how you want to pronounce it, or Ian. So, but what that does, it determines the quality of the experience. Okay, it determines the quality of the experience, because you can create a lot of experiences with Kairos, and you can play all of them, but what kind of quality it's going to have can only be determined by the Aion. Okay, whether it's going to be joyful, whether it's basically those two, peace and bliss. That determines the quality. Quality time is, the more peaceful it is or the more blissful it is, the more quality it is. The more ecstatic it is, the more quality the time is, right? The less it is, and as you lose the infinity, you lose the quality. You start going into Kairos and Chronos, which splits the infinity, and that creates the time, okay, the past and the future, and that creates what we call negative emotions, or disorganized emotions is probably a better term, because completely organized state of consciousness is that infinity, and the more you deviate from that center, the more you're entering the timelines that are not ideal, and so you're moving away from the Aion. Okay, that's enough. I'm sorry. You gotta go. Sorry about this noise. Those chickens always come at the most Kairos moment, you know? But I use Chronos, which is time, and chase them away. Anyway, what was it talking about? Right, the Aion being infinity, and as it splits, it enters Kairos, and then it enters Chronos. Okay, so there's the way you may wanna say is that, for example, your body is more to do with Kairos, physical reality. Excuse me, Chronos, physical reality. Kairos is more to do with your soul. Okay, and it touches the mind a little bit, and so mind is kind of intermediate between the Chronos and Kairos, and then soul is kind of intermediate between Aion and Kairos as well. It's not like perfect like that, but you can say that body mind is uh, Chronos, soul is Kairos, and Aion is the infinite self, God. Spirit is Aion, it's measured in eons or ions. I don't know how to pronounce this, but Aion. Soul is in Kairos, and body is in Chronos. That's what I would say. And mine is kind of in between the Kairos and Chronos. Knowing this, you may approach life differently and understand that there is such thing as the quality of time. And just because you created a story doesn't mean it's going to be quality. This is why sometimes people engage in manifestation without actually addressing the quality of their consciousness in the first place, and therefore creating these forced manifestations. They do work and they come to you, but the quality is not increased. You can manifest whatever you want and still feel miserable. Manifestation does not necessarily make you happy. But if you work on the quality, and that's where usually the alchemy comes in. First, you gotta alchemize the negative emotion, and through that you move closer to the stillness or bliss, and then from there you start creating a story. Okay, so we have the mythology is actually is in your soul, right? So mythology is every time you slay your demon, so to speak, or whether you're in a hero's journey or a villain's journey, that's the mythology. And that is something that you can say a destiny. Okay, because destiny is revealed to you based on the level of consciousness that you are. And if you every time you alchemize something, it starts changing the quality of your experience. And as the quality of experience is being changed, the different myth is being played out, or different uh, epoch of the myth is going to be played out. Whether it's a time of war, whether it's a time of peace, whether it's a time of reunion, whether it's a time, all of that is in that world of mythology. Throughout this, any point of that mythology, you have freedom of creating a story. You live this type of myth, right? And from this myth, if you're not alchemizing anything, you're not interested in advancing in the myth, you're manifesting whatever you want. You're going to be manifesting the story, but according to that myth. And then in Chronos, you have another degree of freedom, which is how you're going to play it. Okay? If the story is playing out, how you're going to play it, you still have some degrees of freedom. So, in my view, sometimes people say like, you can create anything you want. I wouldn't say that. I would say that, or say everything is possible. I would not say that. What I would say everything is possible within the degrees of freedom within that state of the facet of consciousness. There's certain things that are possible within Chronos, and that is restriction and limitation. And within Chronos, there's certain things that's possible, but not beyond. If you want to move beyond, you got to move to Kairos. And there, more things are possible that is outside time. Your imagination, for example, is not limited by time. That's Kairos. But there is still limitation. And what is the limitation? Well, the intensity of excitement, for example, and the quality of that manifestation or that imagination. For that, you got to go into deeper level. Okay, and then you have a degree of freedom that is more infinite. Over there, the limitations go away. But even though you can be in infinite bliss and peace, from there you still want to go into Kairos and manifest something out of it, to create some story out of it. And then you also want to play it. You see, you still need Kairos and need Chronos, and it's not like Aion is better than Kairos or Chronos. They all work together and you need them all. It's a little bit like the trunk of the tree, the branches of the tree, and the leaves. You need them all. Um, and they are for the specific purpose. You cannot expect, because when you try to break the limitations of Chronos, this is when you get frustrated, and you're trying to have a degree of freedom within Chronos, which is not supposed to be there. This is why a lot of villains live in Chronos, and so this is why they try to brute force the reality, rather than moving and figuring out the root cause into into Kairos and even deeper into Aion. Um, into actually gaining real power rather than that brute force that they normally use through the limitation of Kairos. Okay, this could, excuse me, Chronos. Okay, um, this is why if you understand this concept and you use it correctly, at first life may be uh, challenging, because to gain a higher degree of freedom, it's not just given to you. You see, the system is perfectly aligned like that. If you have a certain types of beliefs, you without with these beliefs you cannot go into the deeper states of consciousness, where this bliss and peace is, because you still have a belief that holds you. You gotta let that shit go, burn that up, alchemize it. Then you sink into those deeper states of consciousness of peace and bliss that you've been looking for. This is why if you still have beliefs, you cannot, you still are limited. You cannot enter those states where there are no beliefs and therefore no limitations. Right? It's all logical, all rational. Um, and of course, you wouldn't want somebody with a belief to have that power. It's just like, because that would wreak havoc, of course. So the power increases the less of the beliefs you have, meaning when you can no longer cause mischief, you gain more power. And the right is might, not vice versa. Not the might is right, which is what most people are trying to prove in Chronos. But the right is might, and this is why the real rationalism is supposed to be dissecting the truth all the way to the state of infinity. If you are a really rational human being. But the thing is that you cannot be rational or fully rational and be a coward. That doesn't work like that. And infinity, to a lot of people, feels like death. But death is delicious. And death never walks alone, it always has life with it. This is why the most free state in the world is when you're dead and alive at the same time. You're just coming as those frames in a movie. Like Jesus said, I'm in the world, but I'm not of the world. And you are every frame that comes into existence. That never ends and will never end. Then it is fun to play the game. So that's what I have to say about time. Chronos, Kairos, Aion. And happy playing. And I'll see you in the next one.